Hi, this is my FYP portfolio project presentation. I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's go. So, what was the idea of my portfolio project? So, I wanted to create a monster, like a creature, that I'd create from the ground up through 2D, and then finally sculpting it with the purpose of it being a miniature. Um, and along the way, I wanted to sort of develop some key skills, um, and improve some certain things with my process as I went, and they are these in a bit more detail. So, um, I wanted to improve my knowledge of human anatomy, but not just that. I wanted to improve my ability to sort of warp it and use it in conjunction with shape language to sort of um, to create a character that isn't just accurate but also has a lot of personality to it. Um, I also wanted to um, make design decisions that would be conducive to a successful miniature design, in the sense that I wanted to think about the manufacturing of said miniature. So I needed to be supported in the right way, and I needed to look as good as possible from as many angles as possible. Um, so and I also wanted to follow the design um, pipeline that I outlined within my dissertation. So I've taken it to sort of starting with 2D sort of sketches and silhouettes, and then just taking it through and sort of developing in that way. So yeah. So here are my major influences. I was looking at a lot of Del Toro films and stuff like that, as well as birds and sort of wildlife from my sort of local area. I wanted it to have something sort of personal to me, sort of things that I have found personally kind of creepy in my own life. I've just kind of found birds a little bit creepy um, in general. In terms of the rendering style and sort of how I wanted it to sort of look from a sort of sculpting standpoint, this werewolf over here is quite similar to what I wanted to do. I kind of like the chalky sort of expressive. You can tell that it's sort of that it's a sculpt, but I think in a good way. So I wanted that sort of look for my thing. I wanted it to sort of look corrupted and pained, um, sort of with anatomy that was quite warped, and a mix of different anatomy types, and so that's what's going on here. And here is me sort of generating ideas about that, not just looking at sort of individual details like the body and the head, hands, sort of that sort of thing, and exploring different avenues in that way, but also looking at the form overall through silhouettes and sort of thinking about the pose. As I said before, I wanted quite an arthritic sort of look, so I went for this sort of little one down here of him sort of hunched over with his arms sort of dangling low. This is not just a good design from the shape language sense and the design sense. Um, I think it also promotes sort of good manufacturing principles as well, due to the fact that the arms sort of dragging across the floor also supports the rest of the body, and this is especially important considering it's quite a gangly, tall creature. I intended it to be sort of a larger creature, so these sort of thin limbs wouldn't be as fragile. So yeah, let's continue on that. This is me sort of just blocking in some basic anatomy and stuff like that. I knew that I wanted to look at sort of starving human anatomy, stuff like that, nasty shit like that. Sort of loose skin, that sort of thing, as well as looking at sort of obviously bird anatomy and sort of in the lower legs, kind of like a canine type anatomy. So that's just the basic building blocks of that. And here we have just a side view of that making sure to sort of keep as many angles in my head as possible. This is me going into more specific detail on specific elements, such as the hand that we have here. Again, I wanted it to sort of look bony, arthritic, and sort of the forms of it to be kind of triangulated and gnarled and sort of not pleasant. You know, since the arm and the hand are so large in proportion to the rest of this creature's body, I think nailing this area was very important. So I spent a while not only sort of looking at the anatomy, but also sort of you know, making sure I'm nailing the shape and feel of these sort of key areas. And this is a basic screenshot of just the leg. As I said, I wanted it to sort of have a kind of a canine human sort of mix, like the werewolf in Harry Potter has this sort of thing in the third movie. It's sort of like an elongated foot with sort of like claws in it, similar to a dog in that sense. This at this stage it doesn't have those elements because it's not very far along. It's a very early sort of version of it. But this is just me sort of considering sort of one thing at a time and making sure that I'm getting these sort of more important elements where people will look correct. I'm sort of diverting a lot of attention to the chest as well, as this is going to be quite a bit of detail there. So this is what I ended up with after multiple iterations of especially the torso. So yeah, I have this sort of really elongated arm, this sort of smaller, sort of deformed one, and sort of bony sort of growth sort of coming out of certain parts of him and stuff like that, and loose skin, sort of taking design hints from the Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth. And yeah, I think the pose and the anatomy are looking pretty good at this stage. The anatomy from this point would not change a whole bunch, other than sort of the bicep attaching more to the lower arm and sort of more detail on the back. I was trying to include some feedback gained from an industry professional by the name of Koss, sort of you know, looking at what he said and trying to sort of make adjustments with his sort of words in mind, but not like massive changes from here to the rendering stage, which is what we're going to look at now. So I wanted sort of a dark sort of lighting situation, sort of for it to echo sort of his environment, sort of this dark, sort of gloomy, surreal sort of forest that this creature may inhabit. So yeah, just looking at different lighting and posing well, not posing, but I guess framing techniques for that. Yeah, and so this is what I eventually settled with, sort of a medium between the darker sort of thing that I wanted, and but I had to increase the visibility a little bit so you could actually see the sculpted detail and stuff like that, as well as the color palette. I changed a little bit to be a bit more brighter and a bit more pleasant to look at. So yeah, I thought these were sort of looking well. I liked the fact that I think a lot of these lighting choices sort of draw a lot of attention to his head, which was a very important part of it for me, as it sort of shows a lot of the pain and emotion of the creature. And in terms of it displaying the pose, I think that does it well. It sort of shows that triangulated, nasty sort of shape language quite well. And this is the other one. This is one's better lit. Yeah, just sort of displaying different parts of the model and in more detail. And now we're going to get onto the reflection. So if I was to do this again, I think what I would do is I might be tempted to sort of have do it on a smaller scale. And what I mean by that is sort of um, maybe doing like a bust or something like that. I feel like because I've only been really sculpting for like a year and a half, and I've only been modeling for about 2 years, at all. So to sort of go from sort of a relatively um, you know low experience to just sort of doing the whole thing from scratch and not only replicating human anatomy but sort of warping it and mixing other anatomy, and it's quite a complicated affair. I feel like I might have got better results if I had done something either slightly more basic or slightly smaller in scale, like just, as I said, like a bus or something like that. I think that it's been good for my development. I think I've learned a lot from this, and it's made me think a lot more about sort of um, how the human body sort of interacts with every sort of element of each other, sort of like having an effect on the other. Um, but yeah, I think I wouldn't mind it of just sort of spending a little bit more time um, looking at sort of like perhaps basing or something like that. Like a lot of miniatures have sculpted on sort of bases, um, that they can interact with and stuff like that. Not all of them do. As a matter of fact, the vast majority don't. Often hobbyists kind of like to sort of make their own sort of bases and sort of put them in their own situations. But it would have been something cool that I could have looked at. Um, other than that, I feel like it's gone pretty well. The I feel like the sort of statue, sort of clay, chalky look that I mentioned very early on in the presentation that I wanted was achieved well. And I sort of successfully used shape language and my knowledge of anatomy to sort of create something that is fairly accurate and looks like it could exist, but also something sort of disturbing and has a lot of character to it, not just sort of a technical exercise where it's just a person. I feel like it has a lot of atmosphere to it. So yeah, other than that, I think that's about it. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. If you've got any questions, then fire away. Thanks.